editor-in-chief of The Correspondent.
I'm Ernst, Ernst Jan Pfout, and I'm the publisher of The Correspondent.
Yes, and we are going to tell you how we turned a world record in journalism crowdfunding into an actual publication. Yes, we
both worked at a newspaper called NRC Handelsblad. And if you work at NRC Handelsblad in the Netherlands and you want to explain what kind of newspaper you have, you'll say, we're the New York Times of Holland. So we still say that, even though we don't work there anymore. And we used to work in this magnificent building next to a highway in Rotterdam. And we both live in Amsterdam. So almost every week we joined together in one car and drove to Rotterdam and discussed the future of journalism. Rob was the editor-in-chief of the morning edition, and I was the editor-in-chief of the websites, so nrc.nl. And well, we basically, was kind of a weird appointment, because when Rob got his job, he was 27, and when I got my job, I was 24. So we were the two youngsters in the newspaper there, trying to change journalism, and we both had our visions basically.
Yes, my goal was to change the newspaper to more fit the future, and especially fit the kind of newspaper young readers would want. And my basic idea for changing this newspaper was to go from news to new. I wanted to make a newspaper that was not about news. Two reasons for that. First, news is basically a commodity. Especially young people don't expect to pay for news. You are surrounded by news, so why would you pay for that? And the other big problem with news is that it's not actually worth paying for a lot of the time. News is not a very good product. The basic problem with news is that it's always about exceptions and almost never about rules. So, for example, every day millions of people go to work, they work, and then they go back to their house and have dinner. That's never on the news. But it is the way society operates. So if you learn about society only through the lens of news, then at the end of the day you will know basically how society doesn't work. You don't know about how society works because it's never about the structural underlying developments, and always about the exceptions to these developments. So what I wanted to do was go from the exceptions, the news, to the rules in society, the new. And we found a newspaper that was all about new insights.
And I was responsible for creating the new websites at NRC. And if you worked for the website at that newspaper, it was basically punishment. You just had to wait to be hired for the paper edition. So it was, I had to find a new team of young journalists who were really eager to write for the website. And then we made a website that basically showed that what makes a newspaper different. So the biggest newspaper in the Netherlands, if they would report on something happening in China, they would just copy-paste it from Reuters or AP. Whereas at our newspaper, we have a correspondent there, and we have a desk editor who was writing about China before I was even born. And that is what makes a newspaper different. So that's why we try to basically interview our own experts for the website. So we had the web editors running around, and when something happened in China, for example, they would call the China correspondent and ask him for a quick analysis. And we put the news in context, and by doing that, we tripled the number of traffic, not because we cheated with SEO or with headlines or anything but just by focusing on giving analysis and actually telling what the story is about. And while we were doing this, we noticed that our readers were sharing a lot of insights and information with us. Of course, there were trolls in the comments, but we also saw in the comments that a lot of people shared their insights. And then it suddenly hit me that, let's imagine that 3,000 doctors read that website. Together, they know way, way more than just one medical journalist. And now we have the means for those readers to share their knowledge. So we have to say goodbye to the good old Rolodex with our common experts. We just have to find ways to attract those readers and to lure them into sharing their knowledge. So our quest at the news website was to extract the knowledge from readers. And well, we both failed. Rob was fired. My project was killed by the private equity firm who owned the newspaper. And we had some time to think about why we failed.
Yes, and basically there were two main reasons why we think we failed in changing the traditional newspaper as it was. First of all, basically everything in a traditional newspaper is aimed at safeguarding the legacy. So at a newspaper, it's all about how to keep doing the same things, keep making the same information, keep doing the same, keeping the same ways of operating and functioning and doing journalism only in a new form. So you basically see it with all, let's say, news websites and also the apps that newspapers produce. They are basically the newspaper only in digital form. But content-wise and the way it is produced, there's nothing really different. So safeguarding the legacy is one main thing that holds newspapers back.
You have 200 journalists working for the newspaper and just 10 for the online edition, basically.
Yes, exactly. And then the second main reason is that in Holland, but all over the world, news organizations are basically profit-driven. And that means that if you are profit-driven, and especially profit-driven on the short term, then you become risk-avoiding. Most of our plans, we could not really say this. Oh. Most of our plans, we couldn't really say, well, this is going to be a hit and this is going to generate this kinds of money next month. And because we couldn't say this, our plans didn't pan out. We had to prove that, we basically had to come up with proven concepts. And if you have to come up with proven concepts, then most of your concepts won't be radically different than what you already know. So we left.
Yeah, because we worked at a newspaper. Newspapers in Holland are still very profitable. They made 12 million euros profit the year we worked there, but they gave it all to the private equity firm that owned it, and they didn't invest it in new initiatives. So we had the opportunity to start our own journalistic platform, and that was in 2012. And when we looked around us, we saw some trends, and everybody advised us to follow those trends. And the first one is to start small. Everybody told us, find one developer, find a coffee bar, find 2 laptops, share a laptop if you have to, and start really small, start bootstrapping. So, and then you have to lure every reader, find and grow with one reader at a time. And, well, that was the first thing we heard.
Yes. The second thing we heard is, well, news is a commodity. People are not willing to pay for journalism. So you have to think of a business model, as they as we are used to call it, that is basically not about readers. Go on ads or make branded content. This is what most people told us. You cannot make a profit or a good amount of money with people paying you for journalism.
And you should hire journalists who would write ads, because in the States, a lot of websites are experimenting with that. For example, like BuzzFeed, the yellow article is a sponsored article, and we were told you have to do the same. So don't ask for any money, sell advertising, write your own articles that you can sell to commercial partners. That was basically the advices that we got.
And most importantly, all people told us, keep it short. The attention span of the average news consumer is terrible, and it's getting shorter every day, especially because people are on mobile phones all the time, and mobile phones is not really something where you want to read in-depth, long-form journalism. So keep it short, in other words.
And don't expect anything from your readers. They're just a passive bunch who want to read about kittens and then move on. So don't even think of asking for a contribution, because you only get trolls. Well, we didn't really follow these rules because they were contrary to our beliefs and to what we wanted to do with journalism. So we ignored all the consultants, we ignored all the blogs that said to us we had to do it the way we just described, and we chose a different path. And the first thing we did differently is that we didn't find just one developer and start small. We wanted, we believe we're good storytellers, we're journalists, and journalists are good storytellers, but we also wanted the new good storytellers, developers and designers, because we're making new products, we're making new websites, and we can't even fathom the opportunities, the possibilities for fully digital journalism. And to get a grasp, you should definitely talk with designers and developers from day one. From the first moment you start thinking about journalism, you should invite a designer, you should invite a developer, because they know how to tell the new stories. So we were lucky enough that we found a great partner called Momkai, which is a creative agency. They worked for Nike and Red Bull. Of course, way too expensive for us starting entrepreneurs, but they liked the idea, so they took a share in our company and they work for us for cost price. And what is also really important, these two guys, in a very natural photo, the left one is the CTO and the right one is the designer, and they're also in our board. So every decision is made by, well, us two and a designer and developer. So we think that's essential for a new journalistic endeavor.
Yes, the second advice we didn't follow up on was going on ads. We have no advertisers at all. Not because I think ads are evil, not because I think ads don't have a role at all in journalism. They can have a role, but they change the way you perform journalism. If you are an ad-driven platform, everybody knows this, then you have to, your focus is shifted from content to reach, and especially to the kinds of people you reach. Only advertisers are interested in the kinds of people, the demographics of the group you reach. No journalist thinks, I'm going to write this for 33-year-old wealthy people. They write stories because they think they're important, and eventually they will find an audience that fits the story. So by saying, okay, we're going to try this with no advertisements and also no investors at all, we could really focus on making something that was worthwhile for our only customer, namely the members.
Yeah, so we're totally funded by members.
Members, yes.
There's even a slide which says that. And another thing is what we decided is to ignore the goal to keep it short.
Yes, we decided if you're going to do in-depth journalism, do it without compromise. So the whole platform we in our head was set up like basically aiming at how can we make our journalism as in-depth as possible. And the basic idea behind is that on the web, you don't have any constraints. You don't have pages to fill. You don't have strange deadlines you have to adhere to. You just can write layers on top of each other, link to other stories, go on and on until the point you say you reach where you have the depth you want.
Yeah, and even a reader can decide that. So we can link to a transcript of the interview, we can link to great books we've read for the article, and the reader can decide how far they want to go down the rabbit hole. It's their decision. So we took all these ideas, we ignored all the things the consultants told us, and we tried to build our own platform. And we started doing this back in January 2013. And we started with a crowdfunding campaign in March 2013.
Yes, and the crowdfunding was really important because this was the only way we could start this kind of platform without investors and without loans, without banks telling us what to do. We just wanted to have people, actual readers, actual members supporting us. So how do you get people supporting something that is not even vaguely there? First, very important part is to have people on your team that actually exemplify the kind of journalism you want to make. We see a lot of crowdfunding projects around the world that basically say we are going to do good journalism, we are going to do better journalism. Support us because here you will find the stories that matter. Well, actually almost all news and media platforms say that their stories matter. What you need is also people who actually symbolize what you mean by good journalism. So first of all, I asked a few famous, well-known writers, journalists to join the team. And these people were not just famous, they were famous for a certain kind of journalism. For example, the guy on the left, he's a television reporter who is very well known for like Louis Theroux kind of documentary. Faces, you need the faces who exemplify the kind of journalism you aim at.
Yeah, and the woman on the right is the former leader of the Green Party who well, became a journalist. So we started crowdfunding, and we decided that we needed 15,000 people who would give us 60 euros and then we could make the first year happen. So we needed 900,000 euros, which comes down to $1.2 million for the Americans in the audience. And this is how the website looked in the really early days. We have a different logo now, but we completely built the whole crowdfunding module ourselves. We wanted to completely control the experience. For example, we didn't want to focus on the budget. We wanted to focus on the number of people that joined us. So the counter, this is an old screenshot, but when we went live, the counter showed the percentage of those 15,000 people who had joined us. And we figured our odds were 50-50. Because we did have those big names, we did have ideas, and Rob wrote a great manifesto, but we didn't really know how the website would look. And it would take us another 4 or 5 months to build it. So it was a kind of a vague promise as well. We would say, this is journalism as we think it should be. Give us your money. We have still no idea what we'll do with it, but trust us. So we figured our odds were 50-50, especially because we needed $1.2 million. And a couple months before that, the world record in crowdfunding was broken with the Pebble watch, which was a big thing because it hit the 1 million bar for the first time. So it was insane to think that in a country where only 16 million people live, we only have 16 million people in the Netherlands, to set a world record in journalism crowdfunding. But luckily, we got a good start. We were invited at Holland's most popular talk show called As the World Turns. It's not a soap opera, it's an actual talk show. And every evening, 1 million people look at this show. So it's 1/16 of the population, which is huge, of course. And Rob was interviewed about his plan, and he shared the ideas. And in one day, we already had 5,000 people who joined us, and in 8 days we reached the goal of 15,000 people, which we
could not believe.
Yeah, we were really surprised.
And at the end of the month, the crowdfunding was a month. We ended up with 18,933 members, and then it all started. And we had to still build the platform itself, and we also had to hire a staff and, of course, find an office, which he found in this former Shell building in Amsterdam, the north of Amsterdam. This is where Shell had his laboratory.
We go to our office by boat.
We go to our office by boat, exactly, because it's on the other side of the water. And this is now like a media hub, like a new media hub where all these kind of small startups are in. And we also received 1,800 job applications, which tells us that the crisis in journalism is pretty harsh. We absolutely did not expect so many applicants, but we got them. We finally hired 8 full-time writers and approximately 17 freelance writers, and also 5 supporting staff, including us.
And some of the writers were documentary makers or taped up podcasts, so we have a different breed. But first we asked them to paint the office, which they did.
Yes,
gladly.
This was something that had to happen. And the result was very beautiful, we think, with our logo. This is our office space. On one of the first days, we are actually up and running. And so the people you see here, that's our staff. And what we try to look for in our journalists, in our correspondents, as we call them, is not so much traditional journalists, but actual conversation leaders. So these people, first of all, have to have some kind of mission in journalism. They need to clearly explain to us why they want to write and perform journalism in the first place. If you just want to write about whatever, then that's not good enough. And you have to have some kind of expertise. You have to have some kind of fascination about a subject. Can be any subject. If it's important to society and you know something about it, then you're our guy or girl. So for example, this is our education correspondent. And the interesting thing about him is that he's not only a correspondent for us, but he's also a teacher. So his journalism is also founded upon his experience in his own classroom, where he also writes a lot about. And he writes about large general developments in education and also about small examples in his own classroom.
Yeah, sometimes his students write guest posts.
For example, yes. And this is our correspondent conflict and development. She knows everything about Africa. She knows everything about conflicts and about aid and development in the world. And this is her subject. And she basically, we tell every correspondent, you are free to set your own news agenda. Don't follow what everybody's writing about. Don't think of news as something that has to be in the news already to be relevant. That's something we noticed a lot around journalists, that the reason why journalists feel they can write about something is because it is in the news now. People are talking about it now, and not so much things that are actually concerning the lives of people, whether or not it is in the news. So they are completely free in setting their own agendas and picking their own subjects.
We also took the time of those months to build our own platform together with our partners, Momkai, and we wanted our own platform because we really wanted to figure out new ways of journalism. And the most important thing is that we see our journalists as conversation leaders and our members as expert contributors. So our members have a lot of knowledge. It's also the task of a journalist to get that knowledge online and to improve his or her journalism with it. So we built our completely own platform. As you can see, on the left is the website, on the right is the platform, and you can see as you type how it will look. And we also came up with some new solutions, which we'll, for links, for example, which we'll share later into this presentation. And then on September 30th last year, it was time to launch. And we launched with 20,208 members. So after the crowdfunding, people still became members and in anticipation of the actual launch. And we designed a completely fully responsive website. We didn't build an app yet, simply because we were still figuring out how this platform would work, and we couldn't build two different platforms at the same time. So if we would make an iOS app, our Android members would be pissed off, and if we would make it an Android app, it would be the other way around. So we made a responsive web app that would totally works on every device, and we'll soon be introducing features like offline reading and stuff like that. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into how the journalism actually works on our website.
The most important difference in how we operate as a platform is that the correspondent is, let's say, the central focus point of the whole adventure. So we don't present necessarily, we are not presenting stories on a subject or on something that is in the news now. You follow the correspondent. If you are a member, you can follow all our correspondents, and all these correspondents have their own niche. So, for example, here we have a correspondent Europe, but also a little bit more strange niches like a correspondent progress. This correspondent writes about what is becoming better in the world, not only worse. If you follow a correspondent, then it becomes green, and if you don't, if you're not interested in the subject, then you can unfollow the correspondent as well.
And what happens if you follow a correspondent is that you get all his or her updates. So also the stuff that it's not meant for a general audience. If you're an expert in Europe and you follow the European correspondent, you get all his smaller updates as well, which are only interesting for the Europe geeks, basically. And by doing that, we have two sorts of articles. The updates for the experts, for people who have a specific interest in that subject, and the more general stories which we push to all our members, because we believe you should read about it because it's so important, you should read about it even though you're not interested in it. So that's how we try to kill the filter bubble. And every author has his own garden, as we call it. That was the work title, and we never got rid of it. You could also call it a blog. And it looks like this. It's their own personal homepage, and it's where you can see their stories growing. So they share on the top, they share the research they're doing now, so you can help as a reader. If you're an expert, you can contribute to that story. And on the right, you'll see a biography of the author, but also her favorite blogs about Africa. This is the conflict and development author, but also her favorite documentaries about conflict and development, her favorite books. And on the left, you see our updates. So we believe that just publishing an article as an endpoint isn't enough, that you really have to create a more static environment where you see the files, the dossiers growing, and where you can chime in as a reader and share your knowledge.
And the basic idea behind this also is that we don't think we can defeat all these traditional media just by making better articles. There is a lot of good journalism in traditional media every day. So just saying, okay, we're going to do the same as the newspaper, but even better, that's not going to work. What we can do is defeat the quality of single articles by not just publishing single articles. So that's why we invented the garden.
Yeah, an article is just an update in a bigger story. It's never the whole story at itself. And we also invest a lot in illustrations and photography because it's not just an excuse. It's not the stock photo syndrome that you see everywhere. Oh, we have a story about the police. Let's put up a photo of a police car, or we have a story about data roaming rates. Let's put it in a photo of a woman on the phone. We really try to have illustrations and photography that tells the story as well. So we have a photo editor with a good amount of money she can spend on illustrations. And for example, our correspondent education has his own illustrator. So you'll always recognize his stories by his illustrations. And sometimes we ask photographers to give their own interpretation to the story, which is sometimes pretty explicit. For example, when you ask them to make a photo of that goes with a story about online tracking, you'll get this. And that's what makes our website also appealing, that the photography and the illustrations tell their own story as well. And what we feel is really important is figuring out ways that people can really concentrate on our articles and can really focus on the text instead of all kinds of things that try to lure them away. For example, a hyperlink, as we use it now, it's one solution to we believe 3 problems. So one of them is you're talking about someone or an organization that not all of your readers might know, so you put a link back to the Wikipedia page, for example. Another problem is you're mentioning a story and or a research and you want to link to it, so you put a link behind that word, but people have no idea what they're clicking on and have no idea why they actually have to see that source, whether it's interesting to read or not. And the third problem is that you link to the subject you're writing about. Well, we came up with new solutions for this. For example, for the problem that you don't really know whether someone knows the person you're writing about, we have an info card. So you see over there, this mentions the name of I've got a laser beam.
Yeah, you got a laser.
Yeah, you see the name of an artist. If you don't know Mike Kelly, you click on the arrow and you get a short explanation. That's one way of solving the link problem. Another one is in the sidebar, we link to the sources we've used for the article. So it can be an article you've written before. So here it says read my column. And here it is a link to a story you should definitely read, maybe after you've read this article. And the last one is pretty basic. It's just a read-on link at the bottom. So that's a small example of how we're trying to figure out new ways of improving the reading or watching experience online.
Yes, and also very important for us is that we have what you may call like a soft paywall. People have paid to read the articles, but they can also share every article they read. And to let other people know who these articles have been shared with, that these articles have been paid for by someone else, so they're not free. If you see a shared article on the web, then basically you think, okay, this is free, I got this from somebody else. So we mention who shares the article with you. It says on top, this article is shared by you by, and then member, and then name of the member. So you know that there is a member who actually paid for this article. It's not free at all.
And in the future, we want to show you how many new members you brought in thanks to sharing those articles. And our marketing budget is basically zero. I think we spent around 300 euros, maybe 400 on Facebook promoted posts. All of our other members come via these shared articles by our own members.
Yes, actually this was one of our most shared articles we have written so far.
You can actually read this one because we translated it into English.
Yes.
So what is really important for our new journalism is that we believe that every reader, every member is an expert at something. Everyone who reads us has a specialism, has something to share. And we would be really dumb if we wouldn't use that knowledge. So lately we've heard a lot about news sites shutting down their comments because it's too much noise. Well, I have two favorite one-liners about this. One is from Anil Desh, an American blogger, who says, if your website is full of assholes, it's your own fault. And the other one is by Jay Rosen, and he calls readers the people formerly known as the audience. Well, we really believe that, and we translated that into this motto for our journalists. Our journalists are conversation leaders, and our members are expert contributors. Well, since we launched back in September, we've had around 40,000 comments by our readers, but we actually don't call them comments. We call them contributions. So we don't ask for your opinion, per se. We ask for your experience or for your knowledge and to share that. So it says 27 contributions instead of comments, and as a placeholder it says share your knowledge and experience. So we don't say, well, here's my article, have your say, go ahead and fight each other in the comments. We really invite them to work together with us on making better journalism. And another thing we did is that we invite every reader to provide an expert title or a bio. So you can see in the comments, right next to every contribution, you can see why that person shares his or her experiences, why that would matter. So, for example, you can have a professor of law, but we also see, for example, we had a story about robots yesterday, and then we see a lot of AI scientists joining in, and you can really tell, oh, this guy is saying this because he's a professor of law or because he works with something we just wrote about. Or if you write about an illness, you can see who the patients are and who the doctors are. And it's such a small thing, but since we introduced it, we're absolutely amazed by the knowledge of our members and what they can share. So if you really show your members or your readers that you really want to know what they know about that subject, they will share it with you, and you will have a great contribution section.
Yeah, it works two ways even, because not only are people encouraged to share their knowledge, if you say, okay, if you're an expert, show us, it also works the other way around. People get discouraged if they don't to voice like nonsense opinions or etc., because they stand out as people who don't really know anything about it. So that helps a lot.
So the contributions are not just an excuse for your readers to also have something to do, but really a way to make better journalism.
Yes, and now, as of today, we already have 32,360 paying members who pay 60 euros a year, and which amounts to like 74% growth in our first 7 months, which we are amazed at, because if you look at our marketing budget, which is non-existent, and if you also look at traditional media who are in a declining market and even growing. There was a publisher, famous publisher in Holland, who said flat is the new up. that goes for a lot of if you are used to working in journalism. I've been in journalism for 10 years now. Flat indeed was the new up, but actually for us it isn't.
So we wanted to share some takeaways. Maybe they will be helpful for your journalistic adventures.
Yes. First takeaway is don't necessarily think of what you think people want. That's a basic mistake we learned from marketing. Marketing thinks that if you basically know the demographics of your audience, then you will also understand what they are interested in, what they want. And if you only fulfill those needs, then you have a good product. That's not actually true. We think you have to think of what you think people should want. I have a favorite quote on this of a car maker, Henry Ford, who said, if I asked people what they wanted, then they would say faster horses. And he wanted to build a car. So that's lesson number one.
The second one is that you don't wait for innovation to happen. We tried to make something happen at a traditional company, and we put a lot of effort in it. And in the end, Leonard Cohen was right when he said, I was sentenced for 20 years of boredom for trying to change the system from within. We tried it as well. Luckily, we escaped the 20 years of boredom. But we started to building our own platforms, and the great thing is that we can now, without compromises, do everything that we believe is right for journalism. And it's such a relief that we don't have to focus on the needs of the advertisers, for example, that we can forget about the page view metric, but we can really focus on things we find important for our readers.
Yeah, so and now we have 20 years of stress ahead of us.
Yeah,
okay.
Complete stress, yeah. The other one is, well, we already mentioned that, well, have a designer and developer in your highest ranks. We used to be the only storytellers journalists because we worked for a paper medium that was the same for centuries. But now we're trying to figure out new ways of digital journalism, and we have no idea where we're heading. So, for example, Vox.com, who's doing a great job in explaining the news and really competing with Wikipedia instead of journalists, in 5 years they will look back at what they're doing now and they will think, wow, this was really, really early stages. We have no idea where we're going, so we should really, really invite developers and designers in our highest ranks. So put them in the board like we did. And another thing is that attitude becomes before technology. So if you don't have this great CMS at your disposal, you don't have a designer in your ranks, or you're working at a traditional newspaper, it doesn't start with technology, it starts with your attitude. So the improvements to the comments, to the contribution I've just showed you, is something we've just launched. And we launched it after 5 months of experimenting with our journalists who figured, well, we want the knowledge from our readers, and we really want to talk back to them and really come up with something. And based on those experiences, we developed new technology. So you can start experimenting right away, and your attitude is way more important. And if people will see that it works, then technology will follow, so you can get the budget to change something on your website.
Yes, and the last lesson we've learned is that basically, or in general, you can forget about the hypes, because not that hypes couldn't be true, but they're always true in hindsight. Hypes almost always are about the past, what was the thing to do, or the trend, or etc. And if you think about it, it's such a rapidly changing world. If you think about what is today, then it never is the hype of yesterday. And if you think about what will be interesting tomorrow, then it certainly is not the hype of yesterday. So ignore it.
It's always interpretation and hindsight. And by realizing that, you can also ignore all the things we said, because it's also interpretation and hindsight.
Exactly.
So this is what we wanted to share with you. If you want more specific, more numbers, you can tweet to us, of course. These are our handles. And you can also look up our Medium collection, where we try to update you in English on what we're doing in the Netherlands. And now we would love to hear your questions. I'll just do the moderating.
Do you do moderating?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hello.
Hi guys, congratulations for your very good job. I would like to ask you something about your choice to do a newspaper basically in Dutch. Your newspaper, online newspaper, is in Dutch. I would like to know if for a foreign journalist who wants to work in the Netherlands or, for example, in Belgium, in the Flemish part, it is compulsory to learn Dutch? Because I'm planning to move to Brussels, and I think that maybe it could be easier for me to work in a Dutch context. I mean, I would like to know if it is compulsory to learn Dutch. Thank you.
Well,
Don't learn Dutch, it's such a small language, and only 16 million speak it, so forget about Dutch.
no, it's a very good question because, of course, we decided to go to start in Dutch because this is our home country, and when we started, we absolutely did not know if this is going to work. So you have to start somewhere you have the best shot. If I did this in Germany, for example, I don't know the journalist, I don't know the audience, and nothing. So that's why we started in Holland. But we really want this to actually grow to something that is non-national. Almost all our subjects already are non-national, not nationally oriented. So we love, first of all, to start translating some stuff we already have, so they can reach another audiences outside of the Netherlands. And eventually, I mean, the word correspondent is people from all over the world telling us stories. So what we would love to be in the future is a network of all these different kinds of correspondents from all these different kinds of places in the world, contributing stories in all kinds of languages.
How do you say the correspondent in Italian?
Corrispondente.
Corrispondente. Well,
okay.
Maybe we'll try to start the correspondente in
so
a couple of years.
Our first start is we are looking now in the south, where in Belgium, because it's the same language. And then eventually, if we can succeed launching there as well, then maybe we could do a country where that's not that's a different language area. Yeah.
So if you want to start the correspondent in your own country, come talk to us, because we're definitely interested.
Yeah, it's, oh, I saw you.
Do you have an idea about the average reader of yours? I mean, is it people, the age and the education background? Of course, yeah. Yeah, I'll repeat the question because I don't think your microphone was on. What do you know about your members? Well, we have no idea because we only asked for their name and their email address because we want to lower the barrier to subscribe as far down as possible. And we don't have advertisers, so we don't have to worry about our target demographics. We do, of course, have a Facebook page, and we have more likers than we have actual subscribers, around 55,000. And most of them are in the age group 24 or 25 till 34. And we once did a survey when we just launched the crowdfunding just to see what kind of people subscribed in the first place, because we were just interested. We wanted to know who our readers were. And 92% was educated highly, so went to the university or college. But it shouldn't really matter.
And you use the term average reader. I don't think that there's no average reader. I mean, you can average out a group, but that doesn't really say anything about the reader, I think.
You say that your writers are more conversational readers than journalists. But this is a big difference. They use a journalistic method. They verify the fonts of the events. They do something journalistic, or is something different, like a big social media?
A journalist should filter, select, and present and verify information. And he's been doing that, well, for paper newspapers. But now we have online media, and now we have the opportunity to ask our readers for their knowledge. And every reader is an expert at something, so they know more than just that one guy sitting behind a desk and writing a story. So what has changed, that's why we call them conversation leaders, is that they can also use the knowledge of their readers. So they're still verifying everything, they're still acting as traditional journalists in that way, but it's just their means of getting the information is different.
Yeah, and also what we mean with that is that traditionally, you, as a journalist, you write for a medium. You write for the paper. We try to tell our journalists, you write for your audience, not for our platform. So, and that means that the way you gather facts, the way you check facts, the way you come to subjects that are you think are important and interesting, that you also share. And also when you're finished, when your story is finished, that doesn't stop there. That's when the conversation begins, and then that's where it evolves. So that's why we call them conversation leaders instead of journalists. Journalists tend to produce for their platform and not for their audience.
Hello.
Hi.
You said that as a first step, you found the developers and the designers. So that was a free collaboration? It was a partnership? Or you paid them somehow even before the...
No, they took a risk. So they would say, if we succeed with the crowdfunding, then you should pay us cost price. And if we fail, well, we did it for free. So, and they also are a shareholder in our company, and they work for cost price now.
They invested tens of thousands of euros on their own risk to build this. Yeah.
What?
There, and there.
Okay.
Oh,
so you say that journalists are writing for their audience. So it means that the correspondent doesn't have an editorial line. So mainly every journalist has his own opinion and could follow his own or her own opinion, even if it could be against, for example, your own opinion.
Yes. We basically, what we share is the same kind of values on journalism. We don't share a strict editorial line. I was, when I came in, what amazed me most when I started working at newspapers is that I thought that the conversations I had with the people I was working with were way more interesting than the pieces they wrote in the newspaper. They were telling me stuff that I was amazed by. Okay, this is how it works there, and this is why this is very important. And then you open up the newspaper, and then there's the article that was produced because of the editorial line. Because somebody said, this is in the news now, we have to have something on this now. Go write it. So when I when I gave my journalists the freedom to say, okay, you are your own little editor-in-chief in your own theme or subject, then the stories that came out of it were way more interesting than if I would tell them what to write about. Because my knowledge about almost all these subjects as an editor-in-chief is very limited. I know what is in the news, but not they know what should be in the news. So yes, I'm a very humble editor-in-chief.
Hey guys, Garrett Goodman here. We're on a panel tomorrow, I believe.
Great.
Yeah. There's another panel on crowdfunding tomorrow. Seeing you guys speak about it, it's no wonder you were able to hit this target. I mean, you have so much passion, so I can understand how people get so excited about it. What happens if somebody gets so excited that they want to give you more than 60 euros for the year? Do you allow them to do that?
That happened, yeah.
They did.
Yeah, so feel free. No, we have a donate page where you can donate money. And also when someone signs up, we give them the opportunity to donate more than just the subscription. People can't determine yet where the money goes. We're thinking about maybe we should start, some projects are just too expensive because of insurance, for example. Maybe we could start smaller crowdfunding experiments within our platform, but we're not there yet.
But actually, in the crowdfunding phase, we got we got 200,000 euros extra in donations.
Right.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm not in charge.
Who will respond in case of legal problems or what is right in your platform?
Oh, the correspondent, the company. We have legal advisors, and we didn't happen to have these kinds of troubles yet, but maybe we will, and then we take responsibility for this. It's not the correspondent who is on his own or something.
And everyone we're trying to work with are like-minded people. So our lawyer, for example, or legal counselor, he worked for Google and for some really big firms, then left because he wanted to change how lawyers work. And that's why we worked with him. So we try to figure out everything and see how we can improve it.
Rob and Jan, congratulations on this initiative. My name is Raymond Franken. I'm one of your early subscribers as well.
Great.
I'm just wondering, how do you see the future? 74% growth, is that just the beginning? Will that accelerate? And how do you deal with the fact that you have a one-time startup funding, which your crowdfunding basically is, and moving towards a more sustainable type of funding that can make your ends meet year by year for the next 5 or 10 years? How do you see your future?
Well, September is going to be a really exciting month for us with lots of sleepless nights, because that's when the people who crowdfunded together with us should renew their membership. So all the other memberships after we launched are ongoing, but the new ones should renew their membership. And this is going to be a really exciting time for us, and potentially terrifying. But we see that they're really active, that they're really happy with what we do. And of course, there will be people who leave us, and then this incredible number of 32,000 will be somewhat more modest. But that they made the first year happen, and we have a great head start now. We have a great financial buffer, and we can survive a really big hit in September. And well, we see new people every day joining and who had just heard about the Correspondent. And we think there's a lot of potential, because our brand isn't that super well known yet in the Netherlands. We have a lot to conquer, and that's also why we're branching out to Belgium and looking for international opportunities. And well, let's see if we get invited next year. And then we made the September mark.
Well, and also we want to grow, let's say, in the kinds of subjects we write about, the kinds of correspondence we can present, and also lay out a network of correspondence, maybe, no, well, first in Belgium, but maybe all over the world. So this is what we hope to grow to. Because now, I mean, we don't say ever that we are a substitute for news or for newspapers. We are not. We are very small, and we are very limited in our resources and very limited in our scope of subjects, etc. But making it broader and broader, bigger and bigger, may help attract new niches of people who are interested in certain subjects. So that's very important to us too.
So both of you left, I think, traditional media jobs, yes?
Yes.
So do you think that there's any hope that traditional media entities will adopt any of the approaches that you've described to comments or to the way journalists function, or are those things only possible if you start something new?
Well, I see ourselves as a lab for every journalist in the Netherlands. So we try out things we've been thinking about for years, and which we can finally execute. And we'll see what they will copy, and it doesn't really matter to us, because we want to improve journalism on the whole and not just for ourselves. And we already see the way that news websites in the Netherlands are designing their long reads, as we call them. They look kind of similar, and they're also putting their correspondents their writers more in the limelight, just like we did. So we see that they're adopting some of our changes, and there's not a hostile environment as well. We go to dinner with them, they ask us for advice, we ask them for advice, of course, and it's an exchange.
Yeah, but you have to, I mean, it also depends all on who's in charge in those news, because if you have people there who actually really want to take risks and try something new, that makes a whole lot of difference than if there are people there who basically want to try what already is a success, or copy it or something like that.
Yeah, and Dutch publishers are pretty willing to take risks. For example, we have another thing in the Netherlands that's getting international traction now. It's called Blendel, and it's the iTunes for journalism. It's also a great initiative, and it's made possible by all these publishers who are willing to sell their articles not within their context of their own website, but on a different platform. So I have good hopes for Dutch journalism.
Yes, you said you wanted to expand internationally. I wanted to know if you had already contacts with investors abroad or with other media abroad, and what will be the next geographic step for you? I mean, it is Belgium, you said, right. But is it English?
No, so go ahead.
Oh, well, we have a lot of people coming from all over the world asking us, can we join or can we cooperate or etc. etc. It's very hard for us to answer all these requests because we are a very small group and we have to focus all our energy in even doing right what we do now in our own country. So, but the first step would be Belgium because that's the same language, and then English would be a logical next step because it's the largest language out there. So you could then you would reach a lot of people.
For English, we're going to take a more steady approach. So we're translating our first articles now. We'll publish them on the website called The Correspondent, and then we'll see what happens with the articles. And then we'll improve on that response and maybe expand internationally as well. And if I find, I don't know, the French Rob or the German Rob, I'm all ears. So keep emailing us. Well, thank you very much for your questions. It's 10 minutes past 1 p.m., so we have to stop. Thank you very much for your attention, and let's continue the conversation during this conference. Thank you.
Editor-in-chief of The Correspondent.
I'm Ernst Jan Pfout, and I'm the publisher of The Correspondent.
Yes, and we are going to tell you how we turned a world record in journalism crowdfunding into an actual publication.
We both worked at a newspaper called NRC Handelsblad. And if you work at NRC Handelsblad in the Netherlands and you want to explain what kind of newspaper you have, you'll say, we're the New York Times of Holland. So we still stay that, even though we don't work there anymore. And we used to work in this magnificent building next to a highway in Rotterdam. And we both live in Amsterdam. So almost every week we joined together in one car and drove to Rotterdam and discussed the future of journalism. Rob was the editor-in-chief of the morning edition, and I was the editor-in-chief of the websites, so nrc.nl. And we basically, was kind of a weird appointment because when Rob got his job, he was 27, and when I got my job, I was 24. So we were the two youngsters in the newspaper there, trying to change journalism, and we both had our visions basically.
Yes, my goal was to change the newspaper to more fit the future and especially fit the kind of newspaper young readers would want. And my basic idea for changing this newspaper was to go from news to new. I wanted to make a newspaper that was not about news. Two reasons for that. First, news is basically a commodity. Especially young people don't expect to pay for news. You are surrounded by news, so why would you pay for that? And the other big problem with news is that it's not actually worth paying for a lot of the time. News is not a very good product. The basic problem with news is that it's always about exceptions and almost never about rules. So, for example, every day millions of people go to work, they work, and then they go back to their house and have dinner. That's never on the news. But it is the way society operates. So if you learn about society only through the lens of news, then at the end of the day, you will know basically how society doesn't work. You don't know about how society works, because it's never about the structural underlying developments, and always about the exceptions to these developments. So what I wanted to do was go from the exceptions, the news, to the rules in society, the new. And we found a newspaper that was all about new insights.
And I was responsible for creating the new websites at NRC. And if you worked for the website at that newspaper, it was basically punishment. You had to, or you just had to wait to be hired for the paper edition. So it was, I had to find a new team of young journalists who were really eager to write for the website. And then we made a website that basically showed that what makes a newspaper different. So the biggest newspaper in the Netherlands, if they would report on something happening in China, they would just copy-paste it from Reuters or AP. Whereas at a
traditional newspaper is aimed at safeguarding the legacy. So at a newspaper, it's all about how to keep doing the same things, keep making the same information, keep doing the same, keeping the same ways of operating and functioning and doing journalism, only in a new form. So you basically see it with all, let's say, news websites, and also the apps that newspapers produce. They are basically the newspaper, only in digital form. But content-wise and the way it is produced, there's nothing really different. So safeguarding the legacy is one main thing that holds newspapers back.
You have 200 journalists working for a newspaper and just 10 for the online edition, basically.
Yes, exactly. And then the second main reason is that in Holland, but all over the world, news organizations are basically profit-driven. And that means that if you are profit-driven, and especially profit-driven on the short term, then you become risk-avoiding. Most of our plans, we could not really say this. Oh! Most of our plans, we couldn't really say, well, this is going to be a hit and this is going to generate this kinds of money next month. And because we couldn't say this, our plans didn't pan out. We had to prove that, we basically had to come up with proven concepts. And if you have to come up with proven concepts, then most of your concepts won't be radically different than what you already know. So we left.
Yeah, because we worked at a newspaper. Newspapers in Holland are still very profitable. They made 12 million euros profit the year we worked there, but they gave it all to the private equity firm. Our newspaper, we have a correspondent there, and we have a desk editor who was writing about China before I was even born. And that is what makes a newspaper different. So that's why we try to basically interview our own experts for the website. So we had the web editors running around, and when something happened in China, for example, they would call the China correspondent and ask him for a quick analysis. And we put the news in context, and by doing that, we tripled the number of traffic, not because we cheated with SEO or with headlines or anything, but just by focusing on giving analysis and actually telling what the story is about. And while we were doing this, we noticed that our readers were sharing a lot of insights and information with us. Of course, there were trolls in the comments, but we also saw in the comments that a lot of people shared their insights. And then it suddenly hit me that, let's imagine that 3,000 doctors read that website. Together, they know way, way more than just one medical journalist. And now we have the means for those readers to share their knowledge. So we have to say goodbye to the good old Rolodex with our common experts. We just have to find ways to attract those readers and to lure them into sharing their knowledge. So our quest at the news website was to extract the knowledge from readers. And well, we both failed. Rob was fired. My project was killed by the private equity firm who owned the newspaper, and we had some time to think about why we failed.
Yes, and basically there were two main reasons why we think we failed in changing the traditional newspaper as it was. First of all, basically everything in a that
owned it, and they didn't invest it in new initiatives. So we had the opportunity to start our own journalistic platform. And that was in 2012. And when we looked around us, we saw some trends, and everybody advised us to follow those trends. And the first one is to start small. Everybody told us, find one developer, find a coffee bar, find 2 laptops, share a laptop if you have to, and start really small, start bootstrapping. So, and then you have to lure every reader, find and grow with one reader at a time. And well, that was the first thing we heard.
Yes. The second thing we heard is, well, news is a commodity. People are not willing to pay for journalism. So you have to think of a business model, as they as we are used to call it, that is basically not about readers. Go on ads or make branded content. This is what most people told us. You cannot make a profit or a good amount of money with people paying you for journalism.
And you should hire journalists who would write ads, because in the States, a lot of websites are experimenting with that. For example, like BuzzFeed, the yellow article is a sponsored article, and we were told you have to do the same. So don't ask for any money, sell advertising, write your own articles that you can sell to commercial partners. That was basically the advices that we got.
And most importantly, all people told us, keep it short. The attention span of the average news consumer is terrible, and it's getting shorter every day, especially because people are on mobile phones all the time, and mobile phones is not really something where you want to read in-depth, long-form journalism. So